"Hey, king, get off our backs. Give me liberty or give me death," said Patrick Henry. Really? Was it that bad? By 1776, the American colonists living under English rule thought so. In fact, things were so bad they went to war to gain their independence. But why? What could have been so intolerable? The first Englishmen came to America 400 years ago looking for gold, silver, and a waterway to Asia. They were part of a trading company that convinced the King of England to grant them a charter, giving them permission to set up a colony in America. But they did not find what they were looking for. Times got so hard those first settlers had to eat rats and even each other to keep from starving to death. Pretty soon, though, more people arrived and times got better. The English were here to stay. Hail to the king. Back in England, the king probably figured he had a pretty good deal. Other people got seasick sailing across the ocean to settle in untamed land while he sat in his palace ruling England. Except that being king just wasn't what it used to be. Back in the 1200s, a king could really do what he wanted. But this was the 1600s, and now the English people had representatives in Parliament who made laws and stood up for people's rights. They even gave advice to the king. Bah! You don't mind if we, govern ourselves, do you? In America, the colonists needed some kind of government to deal with everyday problems. After all, the king was on the other side of the ocean. And because of Parliament, the colonists were used to having a say in government. In Virginia colony, the first settlers decided each community should have 2 representatives and that all representatives would meet together. Farther north, in Plymouth, the colonists signed a compact agreeing to form a majority-rule government where all men would vote on whatever issues came up. Women didn't get to vote in 1620. Even so, the king still controlled the colonies, and colonists had to follow England's laws. The House of Burgesses was a group of representatives in Virginia. The Mayflower Compact was the agreement the Plymouth colonists signed while they were still on board the Mayflower, before they even set foot on dry land. Even then, they knew they would need a government. We're doing just fine, thanks. England had a lot of other colonies besides those in America and plenty of other problems to deal with. The king and Parliament didn't have much time to pay attention to the American colonists. By the mid-1700s, there were 13 colonies, and each colony had its own government. These little governments grew stronger and more used to being in control. When problems came up, the colonial governments took care of things themselves. The colonists were out on their own, making their own decisions, governing things the way they wanted to without much interference. A raw deal. But then times got tough, and the British government went looking for money. Great Britain, which now included both England and Scotland, saw its colonies around the world as a source of profit. Colonies were places to cut timber, grow crops such as cotton and coffee, and mine for valuable minerals. The king forced the colonists to sell these raw materials back to England at really cheap prices. People in England would use the materials to make finished products. But did the colonists get a bargain on these items because they provided the materials? No way. The king forced the colonists to buy the finished products at extra high prices. How would you feel? You're finally living on your own, making all your own decisions, and here come your parents. They tell you the fun's over. They're moving in and things are going to be just like old times. No more decisions for you. They're back in charge now. Looking for a fast buck? That was only the beginning. In the mid-1700s, Britain fought 2 expensive wars. Britain had taken out a lot of debt to pay for the war, so it went looking for a way to make money fast. Taxing the American colonists seemed like the perfect idea. So in 1765, Britain passed the Stamp Act, which forced colonists to put expensive tax stamps on all legal documents, as well as newspapers, calendars, and almanacs. The colonists had an answer for that. They quit buying British goods. But after this boycott didn't work for long, Britain repealed the Stamp Act after 1 year, but things did not get better. From bad to worse. As soon as the Stamp Act was gone, the British passed the Declaratory Act, saying that the colonies were dependent on the king and declaring that all laws passed in the colonies had no effect. As if that weren't bad enough, Britain also passed the Townshend Revenue Act, taxing things it knew the colonists couldn't make for themselves: paint, glass, paper, lead, and tea. This act also allowed British government workers to search people's houses and even break down doors to seize items the homeowner hadn't paid taxes for. On top of that, the Quartering Acts of 1765 and 1774 for certain colonists to let British troops live in their houses. The soldiers didn't even have to pay rent. Then, in the 1770s, a series of laws cracked down on rebellious activity in the Massachusetts colony. Colonists called these the Intolerable Acts. Enough is enough. The colonists finally decided there was only one solution: self-government. On July 4, 1776, the colonies adopted the Declaration of Independence, announcing that the United States was free from Great Britain. It wasn't that easy, though. There was the small matter of fighting a war against Britain to make that freedom real. When the Americans won the Revolutionary War, Britain lost all control of the colonies. The United States of America was born.
Here's what you need to do to make sure you finish everything today. First thing, take the quiz. You know the deal. 3 questions, 6 points total. 1 point just for answering a question, 2 points for getting it right, 0 points for not getting it done on time. Open book, open note, and open internet. Find the answers where you need, but I recommend going back and listening to the video to find answers. Then we need to complete the review activities. They're checked for completion, and answers are provided on the following slides, along with guidance and instructions to find the correct answers. So make sure that you are following along with everything that happens on the next couple slides, and we get our work done on time.
Okay, let's start talking about our review activities. Part A, fill in the blank, declaring independence style. Look in the reading and use the word bank to find the missing piece of each sentence. Each word will only be used once, and 2 words will not be used at all. So our words are stamp, compact, constitution, govern, revenue, search, Great Britain, independence, house, and United States. So number 1, the earliest colonists created a blank to work together in order to survive. Well, there's a couple words that make sense here, and I would say compact and constitution make sense, but likely the United States, well, these earliest colonists weren't making a constitution, they were just making an agreement to work together to survive, so that would be a compact. Number 2, the colonists were expected to follow the laws of blank. Well, the colonists wouldn't, and whenever I read through these, Great Britain makes sense and United States makes sense, but if we're talking about colonists, we're not going to be talking about the United States existing yet. So likely this would be Britain. Our remaining ones, the Quartering Act forced colonists to blank British soldiers. Number 4, Britain saw the colonies as a source of blank to pay for expensive wars. Number 5, to sell a newspaper in 1765, you would have to pay for a tax blank on the paper. We celebrate on July 4th because it's when the United States declared what? The Townshend Revenue Act allowed the British government to blank people's homes, and before the French and Indian War, colonies were largely allowed to blank themselves. So take a look at those. Remember, each one in the word bank will be used only once, and 2 will not be used at all. For our next one, we're going to find the odd one out. For each set of 4, cross out the term that does not belong in the set. In the space to the right of the set, explain why that term didn't fit. Set 1, glass, cotton, lead, and tea. So let's see which one of those doesn't fit. Well, from what I understand, we're going to cross out cotton. Cotton was something the colonies produced. The others are things the colonists could only get from Great Britain because glass is a manufactured good, lead is a manufactured good, and tea was something that was brought from Great Britain. So the only thing that was produced in the colonies was cotton. In set number 2, we have Mayflower Compact, Stamp Act, Declaratory Act, Quartering Act. This one should be pretty clear. I mean, even just looking at the names, like it's pretty obvious. It's the Mayflower Compact that we're going to cross out. I'm going to let you figure out that one on your own. Set 3 are minerals, timber, crops, and paint. Another one that should be pretty straightforward, really close to set 1, honestly. Set 4, legal documents, newspapers, troops, and calendars. And set 5, fight a war, search houses, boycott goods, and destroy tea. Again, cross out the one that doesn't fit and explain why that one doesn't fit. Let's do some cause and effect. Match each effect with the correct cause by writing the correct letter on the line. So what we're going to do is we're going to read what's on the left side, the numbered column, and we're going to try to match it with a letter. And in between, I want you to imagine the word because exists there. So for example, number 1, in the 1600s, the king could not do whatever he wanted because, and what's our correct answer there? A, they were angry about Stamp Act taxes. B, the British government was too far away to deal with day-to-day problems. C, they were tired of the way the British treated them. D, he had to share power with Parliament. E, the colonists won the Revolutionary War. F, they knew the colonists couldn't make those items. G, in England, the people were represented in Parliament. And H, it was in debt after fighting expensive wars. Well, if we're talking about the king not doing whatever he wanted, it means he probably had to share power. And if I look at D, it's that he had to share power with Parliament. Number 2, the first colonists started their own governments. Well, why would they have started their own governments? It's because they were responsible for ruling themselves, because Great Britain was pretty far away. So the answer here is the British government was just too far away to deal with the day-to-day problems. So figure out number 3, why were colonists used to having a say in the government? Britain needed a way to make money because of why? The colonists boycotted British goods because why? Number 6, the first colonists started their own governments. Number 7, the colonies declared independence. Number 8, Britain lost control of the colonies. And think about because why. And then protests. The colonies expressed their outrage in many ways. But which protest do you think would have been the most effective to convince the British to repeal some of their taxes? So let's look at that first one. Stop ordering any goods from Great Britain and cancel future orders. Would that be effective? Yes or no? And why would that be effective or not? Well, the reason is that this was a pretty effective tactic. This is a boycott, and boycotts can be a very effective tool because it means there will be less money going to British businesses. So yes, that would have been a very effective tool. What about tarring and feathering the current tax collector? Would kind of torturing that tax collector be an effective or ineffective way of trying to get the British to repeal taxes? What about destroying government property to prevent tax collection? What about refusing to sell anything to Great Britain? What about smuggling in goods and hiding them so the British can't tax them? And what about rioting in the streets? Why would that be an effective way of protesting against the British to get them to repeal some of their taxes? These ones, there aren't clear correct or incorrect answers. I just want you to think about them. And phrases to know. Learn the phrases from the Declaration of Independence by matching it with its definition. So number 1 is unalienable rights. 2 is pursuit of happiness. 3 is natural rights. 4 is consent of the governed. 5 are just powers. And 6 is self-evident. So unalienable rights. Well, if I look on there, there's 2 things that have to do with rights. A, rights people are born with, and D, rights that cannot be taken away. Well, we already know what natural rights are. Those are rights that people are born with. So that one has to be D, unalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away. Very closely related with natural rights. That should give you a big hint there. And then after you're finished with the rest of these activities, I want you to reconstruct the declaration. After you finish the other activities, submit this document, so submit this activity, then grab one of the papers and envelopes from the front of the room, and that envelope are pieces of the Declaration of Independence. Read each statement to decide which section each one belongs in, and piece the declaration back together. So part 1 is the preamble, an introduction explaining why the Declaration is being written. Part 2 are natural rights. The colonists explain the rights of people and the role of government power. Part 3, grievances, a list of the colonists' complaints. And Part 4, the resolution of independence. The colonists declare their independence from Britain. So that is an optional activity at the end. There's nothing you have to submit here, but make sure you get parts A through E submitted so we can get ready to move on.